Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Srinivasa Ramanujan. Srinivasa Ramanujan was an Indian mathematician and autodidact who lived during the British Raj. Though he had almost no formal training in pure mathematics, he made substantial contributions to mathematical analysis, number theory, infinite series, and continued fractions. Ramanujan initially developed his own mathematical research in isolation. It was quickly recognized by Indian mathematicians. When his skills became obvious and known to the wider mathematical community, centered in Europe at the time, he began a partnership with the English mathematician G. H. Hardy. The Cambridge professor realized that Srinivasa Ramanujan had produced new theorems in addition to rediscovering previously known ones. During his short life, Ramanujan independently compiled nearly 3,900 results. Nearly all his claims have now been proven correct. His original and highly unconventional results, such as the Ramanujan prime and the Ramanujan theta function, have inspired a vast amount of further research. The Ramanujan Journal, a peer-reviewed scientific journal, was established to publish work in all areas of mathematics influenced by Ramanujan. Deeply religious, Ramanujan credited his substantial mathematical capacities to divinity. An equation, for me, has no meaning, he once said, unless it expresses a thought of God. Name. The name Ramanujan means, a younger brother of the god Rama. The name Srinivasa is a combination of Shri and Nivasa. Shri refers to the female energy of God, while Nivasa means a living place. So the word Srinivasa literally means the place where the female energy of the god lives. Iyengar is a caste of Hindu Brahmins of Tamil origin, whose members follow the Visishtadvaita philosophy propounded by Ramanuja. There are several opinions concerning its etymology. Early life. Ramanujan was born on the 22nd of December 1887 into a Tamil Brahmin Iyengar family in a road, Madras Presidency, at the residence of his maternal grandparents. His father, K. Srinivasa Iyengar, worked as a clerk in a sari shop and hailed from Tanjavur district. His mother, Kamala Tamil, was a housewife and also sang at a local temple. They lived in a small traditional home on Serongapani Sanadi Street in the town of Kumbakonam. The family home is now a museum. When Ramanujan was a year and a half old, his mother gave birth to a son, Siddhargopan, who died less than 3 months later. In December 1889, Ramanujan contracted smallpox. But unlike the thousands in the Tanjavur district who died of the disease that year, he recovered. He moved with his mother to her parents' house in Kanchipuram, near Madras. His mother gave birth to 2 more children, in 1891 and 1894, but both died in infancy. On the 1st of October 1892, Ramanujan was enrolled at the local school. After his maternal grandfather lost his job as a court official in Kanchipuram, Ramanujan and his mother moved back to Kumbakonam and he was enrolled in the Kangayan primary school. When his paternal grandfather died, he was sent back to his maternal grandparents, then living in Madras. He did not like school in Madras, and tried to avoid attending. His family enlisted a local constable to make sure the boy attended school. Within 6 months, Ramanujan was back in Kumbakonam. Since Ramanujan's father was at work most of the day, his mother took care of the boy as a child. He had a close relationship with her. From her, he learned about tradition and Puranas. He learned to sing religious songs, to attend pujas at the temple, and to maintain particular eating habits, all of which are part of Brahmin culture. At the Kangayan Primary School, Ramanujan performed well. Just before turning 10, in November 1897, he passed his primary examinations in English, Tamil, geography and arithmetic, with the best scores in the district. That year, Ramanujan entered Town Higher Secondary School, where he encountered formal mathematics for the first time. By age 11, he had exhausted the mathematical knowledge of 2 college students who were lodgers at his home. He was later lent a book by S.L. Loney on advanced trigonometry. He mastered this by the age of 13 while discovering sophisticated theorems on his own. By 14, he was receiving merit certificates and academic awards that continued throughout his school career, and he assisted the school in the logistics of assigning its 1,200 students to its 35-odd teachers. He completed mathematical exams in half the allotted time, and showed a familiarity with geometry and infinite series. Ramanujan was shown how to solve cubic equations in 1902. He developed his own method to solve the quartic. The following year, Ramanujan tried to solve the quintic, not knowing that it could not be solved by radicals. In 1903, when he was 16, Ramanujan obtained from a friend a library copy of A.A. Synopsis of Elementary Results in Pure and Applied Mathematics, G.S. Carr's collection of 5,000 theorems. Ramanujan reportedly studied the contents of the book in detail. The book is generally acknowledged as a key element in awakening his genius. The next year, Ramanujan independently developed and investigated the Bernoulli numbers, and calculated the Euler-Mascheroni constant up to 15 decimal places. His peers at the time commented that they rarely understood him and stood in respectful awe of him. When he graduated from Town Higher Secondary School in 1904, Ramanujan was awarded the K. Ranganatha Rao Prize for Mathematics by the school's headmaster, Krishnaswamy Iyer. Iyer introduced Ramanujan as an outstanding student who deserved scores higher than the maximum. He received a scholarship to study at Government Arts College, Kumbakonam, but was so intent on mathematics that he could not focus on any other subjects, and failed most of them, losing his scholarship in the process. In August 1905, Ramanujan ran away from home, heading towards Visakhapatnam, and stayed in Rajahmundry for about a month. He later enrolled at Pachayappa's College in Madras. There he passed in mathematics, choosing only to attempt questions that appealed to him and leaving the rest unanswered, but performed poorly in other subjects, such as English, physiology and Sanskrit. Ramanujan failed his Fellow of Arts exam in December 1906 and again a year later. Without a FA degree, he left college and continued to pursue independent research in mathematics, living in extreme poverty and often on the brink of starvation. It was in 1910, after a meeting between the 23-year-old Ramanujan and the founder of the Indian Mathematical Society, V. Ramaswamy Iyer, also known as Professor Ramaswamy, that Ramanujan started to get recognition within the mathematics circles of Madras, subsequently leading to his inclusion as a researcher at the University of Madras. Adulthood in India. On 14 July 1909, Ramanujan married Janaki, then a 10-year-old girl whom his mother had selected for him a year earlier. It was not unusual for marriages to be arranged with young girls. Some sources claim Janaki was 10 years old when they married. She came from Rajendram, a village close to Maruja railway station. Ramanujan's father did not participate in the marriage ceremony, as was common at that time. Janaki Ammal continued to stay at her maternal home for 3 years after marriage till she attained puberty. In 1912, when Janaki was 12 years old, she and Ramanujan's mother joined Ramanujan in Madras. After the marriage, Ramanujan developed a hydrocele testis. The condition could be treated with a routine surgical operation that would release the blocked fluid in the scrotal sac. But his family did not have the money for the operation. In January 1910, a doctor volunteered to do the surgery at no cost. After his successful surgery, Ramanujan searched for a job. He stayed at a friend's house while he went from door to door around Madras looking for a clerical position. To make money, he tutored students at Presidency College who were preparing for their FA exam. In late 1910, Ramanujan was sick again. He feared for his health, and told his friend R. Radhakrishna Iyer to hand these, Ramanujan's mathematical notebooks, over to Professor Singaravalu Mudalia, the mathematics professor at Pachayappa's College, or to the British Professor Edward B. Ross of the Madras Christian College. After Ramanujan recovered and retrieved his notebooks from Iyer, he took a train from Kumbakonam to Villapuram, a coastal city under French control. In 1912, Ramanujan moved to a house in Saivamuthai Mudali Street, Georgetown, Madras, with his wife and mother, where they lived for a few months. In May 1913, upon securing a research position at Madras University, Ramanujan moved with his family to Triplicane. Attention towards mathematics. Ramanujan met Deputy Collector V. Ramaswamy Iyer, who had founded the Indian Mathematical Society. Wishing for a job at the Revenue Department, where Iyer worked, Ramanujan showed him his mathematics notebooks. As Iyer later recalled, I was struck by the extraordinary mathematical results contained in the notebooks. I had no mind to smother his genius by an appointment in the lowest rungs of the Revenue Department. Iyer sent Ramanujan, with letters of introduction, to his mathematician friends in Madras. Some of them looked at his work and gave him letters of introduction to R. Ramachandra Rao, the district collector for Nellore and the secretary of the Indian Mathematical Society. Rao was impressed by Ramanujan's research, but doubted that it was his own work. Ramanujan mentioned a correspondence he had with Professor Saldanha, a notable Bombay mathematician, in which Saldanha expressed a lack of understanding of his work, but concluded that he was not a phony. Ramanujan's friend C. V. Rajagopalachari tried to quell Rao's doubts about Ramanujan's academic integrity. Rao agreed to give him another chance, and listened as Ramanujan discussed elliptic integrals, hypergeometric series, and his theory of divergent series, which Rao said ultimately converted him to a belief in Ramanujan's brilliance. When Rao asked him what he wanted, Ramanujan replied that he needed work and financial support. Rao consented and sent him to Madras. He continued his research, with Rao's financial aid taking care of his daily needs. With Iyer's help, Ramanujan had his work published in the Journal of the Indian Mathematical Society. One of the first problems he posed in the journal was, Sqrt Hardy was also impressed by some of Ramanujan's other work relating to infinite series, 1 5 left cubed plus 9 left cubed 13 left cubed plus CDOTS frac pi 1 plus 9 left caret 4 plus 17 left caret 4 plus 25 left caret 4 plus CDOTS frac SQRT pi gamma squared left. The first result had already been determined by G. Bauer in 1859. The second was new to Hardy, and was derived from a class of functions called hypergeometric series, which had first been researched by Leonhard Euler and Carl Friedrich Gauss. Hardy found these results much more intriguing than Gauss' work on integrals. After seeing Ramanujan's theorems on continued fractions on the last page of the manuscripts, Hardy commented that they theorems defeated me completely. I had never seen anything in the least like them before. He figured that Ramanujan's theorems must be true, because, if they were not true, no one would have the imagination to invent them. Hardy asked a colleague, J. E. Littlewood, to take a look at the papers. Littlewood was amazed by Ramanujan's genius. After discussing the papers with Littlewood, Hardy concluded that the letters were certainly the most remarkable I have received, and said that Ramanujan was a mathematician of the highest quality, a man of altogether exceptional originality and power. One colleague, E. H. Neville, later remarked that not one theorem could have been set in the most advanced mathematical examination in the world. On the 8th of February 1913, Hardy wrote Ramanujan a letter expressing his interest in his work, adding that it was essential that I should see proofs of some of your assertions. Before his letter arrived in Madras during the third week of February, Hardy contacted the Indian office to plan for Ramanujan's trip to Cambridge. Secretary Arthur Davies of the Advisory Committee for Indian Students met with Ramanujan to discuss the overseas trip. In accordance with his Brahmin upbringing, Ramanujan refused to leave his country to go to a foreign land. Meanwhile, he sent Hardy a letter packed with theorems, writing, "I have found a friend in you who views my labor sympathetically." To supplement Hardy's endorsement, Gilbert Walker, a former mathematical lecturer at Trinity College, Cambridge, looked at Ramanujan's work and expressed amazement, urging the young man to spend time at Cambridge. As a result of Walker's endorsement, B. Hanumantarao, a mathematics professor at an engineering college, invited Ramanujan's colleague Narayanaraya to a meeting of the Board of Studies in Mathematics to discuss what we can do for S. Ramanujan. The board agreed to grant Ramanujan a research scholarship of 75 rupees per month for the next 2 years at the University of Madras. While he was engaged as a research student, Ramanujan continued to submit papers to the Journal of the Indian Mathematical Society. In one instance, Narayanaraya submitted some of Ramanujan's theorems on summation of series to the journal, adding, "The following theorem is due to S. Ramanujan, the mathematics student of Madras University." Later in November, British professor Edward B. Ross of Madras Christian College, whom Ramanujan had met a few years before, stormed into his class one day with his eyes glowing, asking his students, "Does Ramanujan know Polish?" The reason was that in one paper, Ramanujan had anticipated the work of a Polish mathematician whose paper had just arrived in the day's mail. In his quarterly papers, Ramanujan drew up theorems to make definite integrals more easily solvable. Working off Giuliano Frulani's 1821 integral theorem, Ramanujan formulated generalizations that could be made to evaluate formally unyielding integrals. Hardy's correspondence with Ramanujan soured after Ramanujan refused to come to England. Hardy enlisted a colleague lecturing in Madras, E. H. Neville, to mentor and bring Ramanujan to England. Neville asked Ramanujan why he would not go to Cambridge. Ramanujan apparently had now accepted the proposal, as Neville put it. Ramanujan needed no converting and that his parents' opposition had been withdrawn. Apparently, Ramanujan's mother had a vivid dream in which the family goddess, the deity of Namagiri, commanded her to stand no longer between her son and the fulfillment of his life's purpose. Ramanujan voyaged to England by ship, leaving his wife to stay with his parents in India. Life in England. Cambridge, Ramanujan departed from Madras aboard the SS Srinivasa on 17 March 1914. When he disembarked in London on 14 April, Neville was waiting for him with a car. 4 days later, Neville took him to his house on Chesterton Road in Cambridge. Ramanujan immediately began his work with Littlewood and Hardy. After 6 weeks, Ramanujan moved out of Neville's house and took up residence on Fuels Court, a 5-minute walk from Hardy's room. Hardy and Littlewood began to look at Ramanujan's notebooks. Hardy had already received 120 theorems from Ramanujan in the first 2 letters. But there were many more results and theorems in the notebooks. Hardy saw that some were wrong. Others had already been discovered, and the rest were new breakthroughs. Ramanujan left a deep impression on Hardy and Littlewood. Littlewood commented, "I can believe that helps at least a Jacobi," while Hardy said he can compare him only with Euler or Jacobi. Ramanujan spent nearly 5 years in Cambridge collaborating with Hardy and Littlewood, and published part of his findings there. Hardy and Ramanujan had highly contrasting personalities. Their collaboration was a clash of different cultures, beliefs, and working styles. Hardy was an atheist and an apostle of proof and mathematical rigor, whereas Ramanujan was a deeply religious man who relied very strongly on his intuition. While in England, Hardy tried his best to fill the gaps in Ramanujan's education without interrupting his inspiration. Ramanujan was awarded a Bachelor of Science degree by Research in March 1916 for his work on highly composite numbers, the first part of which was published as a paper in the Proceedings of the London Mathematical Society. The paper was more than 50 pages and proved various properties of such numbers. Hardy remarked that it was one of the most unusual papers seen in mathematical research at that time, and that Ramanujan showed extraordinary ingenuity in handling it. On 6 December 1917, he was elected to the London Mathematical Society. In 1918 he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society, the second Indian admitted to the Royal Society, following Ardashir Kursiji in 1841. At age 31, Ramanujan was one of the youngest fellows in the history of the Royal Society. He was elected for his investigation in elliptic functions and the theory of numbers. On 13 October 1918, he was the first Indian to be elected a Fellow of Trinity College, Cambridge. Illness and death. Throughout his life, Ramanujan was plagued by health problems. His health worsened in England. He was diagnosed with tuberculosis and a severe vitamin deficiency, and was confined to a sanatorium. In 1919 he returned to Kumbakonam, Madras Presidency, and soon thereafter, in 1920, died at the age of 32. After his death, his brother Tirunarajan chronicled Ramanujan's remaining handwritten notes consisting of formulae on singular moduli, hypergeometric series and continued fractions, and compiled them. Ramanujan's widow, SMT. Janaki Amal, moved to Bombay. In 1950 she returned to Madras, where she lived in Triplicane until her death in 1994 at the age 95. A 1994 analysis of Ramanujan's medical records and symptoms by Dr. D.A.B. Young concluded that it was much more likely he had hepatic amoebiasis, an illness then widespread in Madras, rather than tuberculosis. He had 2 episodes of dysentery before he left India. When not properly treated, dysentery can lie dormant for years and lead to hepatic amoebiasis. Amoebiasis was a treatable, and often curable disease at the time. Personality and spiritual life. Ramanujan has been described as a person of a somewhat shy and quiet disposition, a dignified man with pleasant manners. He lived a rather Spartan life at Cambridge. Ramanujan's first Indian biographers describe him as a rigorously orthodox Hindu. He credited his acumen to his family goddess, Mahalakshmi of Namakkal. He looked to her for inspiration in his work and said he dreamed of blood drops that symbolized her male consort, Nrsimha. Afterward he would receive visions of scrolls of complex mathematical content unfolding before his eyes. He often said, "An equation, for me, has no meaning unless it represents a thought of God." Hardy cites Ramanujan as remarking that all religions seemed equally true to him. Hardy further argued that Ramanujan's religious belief had been romanticized by Westerners and overstated, in reference to his belief, not practiced by Indian biographers. At the same time, he remarked on Ramanujan's strict vegetarianism. Mathematical achievements. In mathematics, there is a distinction between insight and formulating, or working through a proof. Ramanujan proposed an abundance of formulae that could be investigated later in depth. G.H. Hardy said that Ramanujan's discoveries are unusually rich and that there is often more to them than initially meets the eye. As a byproduct of his work, new directions of research were opened up. Examples of the most interesting of these formulae include the intriguing infinite series 4, one of which is given below, frac pi frac 9801, sum caret inf d underscore frac caret 4396 caret. This result is based on the negative fundamental discriminant with class number, and is related to the fact that e caret right caret plus left right caret frac pi frac gamma caret 4 left for all, where is the gamma function, and related to a special value of the Dedekind data function, expanding into series of powers and equating coefficients of, and gives some deep identities for the hyperbolic secant. In 1918 Hardy and Ramanujan studied the partition function extensively. They gave a non-convergent asymptotic series that permits exact computation of the number of partitions of an integer. Hans Rademacher, in 1937, was able to refine their formula to find an exact convergent series solution to this problem. Ramanujan and Hardy's work in this area gave rise to a powerful new method for finding asymptotic formulae called the circle method. In the last year of his life, Ramanujan discovered Mach theta functions. For many years these functions were a mystery, but they are now known to be the holomorphic parts of harmonic weak mass forms. The Ramanujan conjecture. Although there are numerous statements that could have borne the name Ramanujan conjecture, there is one that was highly influential on later work. In particular, the connection of this conjecture with conjectures of André Weil in algebraic geometry opened up new areas of research. That Ramanujan conjecture is an assertion on the size of the tau function, which has as generating function the discriminant modular form delta, a typical cusp form in the theory of modular forms. It was finally proven in 1973, as a consequence of Pierre Deligne's proof of the Weil conjectures. The reduction step involved is complicated. Deligne won a Fields Medal in 1978 for that work. In his paper, on certain arithmetical functions, Ramanujan defined the so-called delta function whose coefficients are called. He proved many congruences for these numbers such as for primes. This congruence inspired Jean-Pierre Serre to conjecture that there is a theory of Galois representations which explains these congruences, and more generally all modular forms, is the first example of a modular form. to be studied in this way. Pierre Deligne proved Serre's conjecture. The proof of Fermat's last theorem proceeds by first reinterpreting elliptic curves and modular forms in terms of these Galois representations. Without this theory there would be no proof of Fermat's last theorem. Hardy-Ramanujan number 1729. The number 1729 is known as the Hardy-Ramanujan number after a famous visit by Hardy to see Ramanujan at a hospital. In Hardy's words, "I remember once going to see him when he was ill at Putney. I had ridden in taxi cab number 1729 and remarked that the number seemed to me rather a dull one, and that I hoped it was not an unfavorable omen." "No," he replied. "It is a very interesting number. It is the smallest number expressible as the sum of two cubes in two different ways." Immediately before this anecdote, Hardy quoted Littlewood as saying, "Every positive integer was one of Ramanujan's personal friends. The two different ways are 1729 13 plus 123 93 plus 103. Generalizations of this idea have created the notion of taxicab numbers. Other mathematicians' views of Ramanujan. Hardy said, "He combined a power of generalization, a feeling for form, and a capacity for rapid modification of his hypotheses, that were often really startling, and made him, in his own peculiar field, without a rival in his day. The limitations of his knowledge were as startling as its profundity. Here was a man who could work out modular equations and theorems, two orders unheard of, whose mastery of continued fractions was beyond that of any mathematician in the world, who had found for himself the functional equation of the zeta function, and the dominant terms of many of the most famous problems in the analytic theory of numbers. And yet he had never heard of a doubly periodic function or of Cauchy's theorem, and had indeed but the vaguest idea of what a function of a complex variable was. When asked about the methods Ramanujan employed to arrive at his solutions, Hardy said that they were arrived at by a process of mingled argument, intuition, and induction, of which he was entirely unable to give any coherent account. He also stated that he had never met his equal, and can compare him only with Euler or Jacobi. K. Srinivasa Rao has said, as for his place in the world of mathematics, we quote Bruce C. Berndt, Paul Erdos has passed on to us Hardy's personal ratings of mathematicians. Suppose that we rate mathematicians on the basis of pure talent on a scale from 0 to 100. Hardy gave himself a score of 25, J. E. Littlewood 30, David Hilbert 80, and Ramanujan 100. During a lecture at IIT Madras in May 2011, Berndt stated that, over the last 40 years, as nearly all of Ramanujan's theorems have been proven right, there had been greater appreciation of Ramanujan's work and brilliance, and that Ramanujan's work was now pervading many areas of modern mathematics and physics. In his book Scientific Edge, the physicist Jayant Narlikar spoke of Srinivasa Ramanujan, discovered by the Cambridge mathematician Hardy, whose great mathematical findings were beginning to be appreciated from 1915 to 1919. His achievements were to be fully understood much later, well after his untimely death in 1920. For example, his work on the highly composite numbers started a whole new line of investigations in the theory of such numbers. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.